Okay, this is Earl Purdy. I want to welcome you to A Course in Miracles here on Facebook Live today. I had to recognize the problem so the problem could be solved. And so much for going live on YouTube. A problem can't be solved if you don't know what it is. A problem can't be solved if you don't know what it is. A problem can't be solved if you don't know what it is. So what that means is, if you have any problems that you think have not been solved, it means you don't really know what the problem is, and you haven't really found out what the problem is yet, according to the Course. I'll say it again. A problem can't be solved if you don't know what it is. Lesson 79 in the workbook, if you got the Course in Miracles book, it's going to be on page 79. And that lesson is, let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved.
Page 141.
Page 141. Page 141. In the Course in Miracles, the Blue Book, the Foundation for Inner Peace version of the Course in Miracles. Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. I'd like you to silently say that to yourself. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let you recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Even if the problem is already solved, you will still have the problem. And why do you still have the problem? He says, because you won't recognize that the problem has been solved. That's the situation of the world. That's the situation of the world that we're in right now. The situation that the world is in right now is the reason why it looks like the problems haven't been solved. And it looks like whatever problem you think has not been solved is because you don't recognize what the problem is. So I'll say it again. In any area of your life that you think you have any kind of problem in at all, if you still think you have the problem according to this, you don't recognize what the problem really is. You don't recognize what the problem really is. If you think you have a financial problem, then you don't really recognize what your problem really is. If you think you have some sort of a relationship problem or career problem or a spiritual problem, any problem that you think you have right now, if you look at it as a problem that hasn't been solved, then what the Course is telling us to do is to tell ourselves, well, I don't really recognize what the problem is. And that's why the problem hasn't been solved. I don't recognize what the problem is. Because what most people do is make up a solution to the problem that they think would be the solution to the problem. Have you ever done that? Yes. Okay, try to come up with your own solution to what you think the problem is. And did it also sometimes look like the problem wasn't solved? In other words, have you ever tried to say, I've solved something and haven't been able to do it? Okay, the Course is telling us that it's because you don't really know what the problem really is. Because if you knew what the problem really was, the problem would be solved. If you really knew what your relationship problem is, if you're having a problem in any kind of relationship, it would be solved. If you really knew what your health problem is, if you got any kind of health problem, it would be solved. If you have a financial problem, if you have any kind of problem, if you really recognize what the problem really is, that problem will be solved. So does that mean that if a person's going to get to how they can solve their particular problem, they first need to recognize that they don't know what the problem really is? So what I would suggest for myself and what I would suggest for you is for you to tell yourself in whatever area you still have unhappiness in, and what you think of as injustices in, or anything that's making you lose your peace, you need to tell yourself, I'm never upset for the reason I think. I'm not upset for the reason I think. I'm not upset for the reason I think. Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. And the truth is, honey, I don't know what the problem is between you and me right now because we haven't been able to solve this problem between you and me right now, which means neither one of us really recognize what the problem is right now. God, wow. I think there's a problem between me feeling connected to my source. I feel like there's a problem with me being connected to my spiritual self, to God. I feel like there's a separation between me and my Creator. That's my problem. Okay, so that means I don't really recognize, well, what is the problem? So the Course is saying if it is really solved already, even if it's really solved, so your problem could be solved, but to you it'll seem like you still have the problem because you don't recognize what the problem is. Here's an example. The Course in Miracles absolutely teaches you how to let go of every block that keeps you from being happy in every area of your life. In this book are solutions to every problem that you think you have. So that means if there are solutions to every problem that I think I have, if there's a solution to every problem I think I have, doesn't that mean that problem has been solved? So your problems could be solved, but you don't know it, which is what it says. Even if your problem is already solved, you'll still have the problem because you don't recognize that it's been solved. This is the situation of this world. The problem of separation, which is the only problem, the problem of separation has already been solved. Whether it's the separation from my source, the separation from my abundance, the separation from my health, the separation from my spirit. The only problem is separation. If I'm upset, I'm separate from peace. If I feel like I have lack, then I'm feeling separate from my abundance. The only problem is if I'm sad, I feel like I'm separate from my happiness. The only problem is separation. The only problem is separation. The only problem is separation. And that problem has already been solved because you're not really separate from your abundance. You're not really separate from God. You're not really separate from your health. You're not really separate from your happiness. Guess what? The problem has already been solved, but the solution isn't recognized. Why is it that I don't recognize the solution? He says, well, the reason why you don't recognize the solution is you don't recognize what the problem is. Did you say when you had this problem, the last time you had a problem, was the first thing that you said to yourself is, man, my problem right now that I'm going through on my job is a problem of separation. The last time you weren't feeling well physically, did you say the only reason that I'm feeling bad right now is I feel separate? So we're all being honest, none of us have done that. Right. Okay, the problem, that's the answer, but we're not using the answer, right? So he says the solution isn't recognized because the problem isn't recognized. That's why the solution isn't recognized, because I didn't recognize that my real problem is that I feel separate from God. I feel separate from love. I feel separate from my source. That's the real problem, is I feel like I'm this separate guy named Earl Purdy in a body that's separate from all of you, and we all got our different interests, that we all compete, and we out here looking at ourselves as separate from each other. Because if I thought you were me, and I thought you were connected to me, then I would have a totally different way I would be relating to you, and you would have a totally different way that you would be relating to me. I would be looking out for you as much as I would be looking out for me. If I really thought you were me, and I really thought you were joined with me, then I would want you to be happy as much as I would want to be happy. And not only that, I would look at your gains as my gains. Whenever something went great for you, I would look like, oh, that's something that's going great for me, because we are joined, we are connected, we are one. So the problem is, I think I'm separate from my peace, and I think I'm separate from my happiness, and I think I'm separate from my source. And any problem that we're in, the problem is separation. It's really some form of separation. That's the problem. Now, of course, we don't jump up and down with joy, and I don't see everybody looking real thrilled and turned on by nothing I'm saying, but actually, but that doesn't stop it from being the truth. Why don't we get excited? Well, usually we don't get excited because we're hearing an answer other than the one we've made up, or the answer that we think should be the answer. I don't see the relevance of saying the problem that I'm having with my partner right now is separation, or the problem that I'm having on my job is separation. That doesn't make me jump up and down with joy to hear that, but that doesn't mean that's not the answer. So everybody in this world seems to have their own special problems. I'm just going down in the lesson. Everyone in the world seems to have their own special problems. It looks like I have problems that are different from your problems. I got my special problems. Do you have your special problems? Everybody out there, do you have your special problems?
Yes.
Yes, we all have our special, because we're so freaking special ourselves. So we just have all our own little special problems, right? And so the Course says, don't know how to break this to you, but all the problems are all the same. Your problems are the same as my problems are the same as your problems. All your problems are based on feeling like you're separate from whatever the solution is, and all my problems is me somehow thinking that I'm separate from the solution to all of my problems. My problem is separation, and guess what? Your problem is also separation too. All our problems are the same. Yet, that must be recognized if you're going to accept the one solution that solves all of your problems. So if I'm going to accept the solution to all my problems, the first thing I need to tell myself is all my problems are the same. Now, in my experience, most people think their problems are different. Like my financial problem is different from my health problem, is different from my car problem, is different from, you see what I'm saying? We believe we have a lot of different problems. We tend not to believe what? That all our problems are the same. So if I'm going to accept the solution that will solve all of my problems, I need to say to myself, all of my problems are the same. All of my problems are the same. Whether I believe it or not, all my problems are the same. Whether it looks like it or not, all my problems are the same. So how do I do that in the context of really doing the Course in Miracles and getting rid of my resistance? The solution. What is the solution? Well, the solution is we need to remember that you don't have to believe these ideas, you don't have to accept these ideas, you don't have to welcome these ideas. Some of these ideas you're going to actively resist, some of the ideas you're going to find hard to believe, and some of the ideas are going to startle you. And not only that, you may think that your analyzation of the idea, your judging of the idea is really important, that you analyze and that you understand. The Course is saying you're not really being asked to judge the ideas. You're just being asked to use the ideas. And if you use the ideas, it will give the ideas meaning. So how would we do that? Because my Course in Miracles class is all about, for me, about making this practical. I know it can be fun to do abstract philosophical discussions about what it says, but really I want to know how I can use this the rest of the day and the rest of this week so that I can get rid of the problems that I think I have. So using the ideas, what would that look like? Using the ideas will show you that they're true. So the Course says using the ideas would be simply you saying, let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Reminding myself that if I still think I have the problem, I really don't know what the problem is. And a practical application would be me telling myself all my problems are the same. That would be the practical application of the idea. And you don't have to believe it or accept it or welcome it. But the key to being successful after 40 plus years of working with the Course, I'm going to tell you, it has nothing to do with your understanding, and it has nothing to do with your agreement. It has to do with using the ideas, whether you believe it, accept it, or welcome them. So it will become you going, look here, I don't understand how all my problems are the same because it looks like I have a lot of different problems, but I'm going to tell myself all my problems are the same, because who can see that a problem's been solved if they think the problem is something else, right? If I think the reason why the Wi-Fi didn't work temporarily was because someone opened the kitchen, the refrigerator door, then if I think that's the problem, how successful would I have been at getting the Wi-Fi to work? No. So that's what the Course is telling us. How can you see that the problem has been solved if you think the problem is what you think the problem is? So as long as you think the problem is what you think the problem is, then you won't see that your problems have been solved. I won't see that any problem that I have has been solved if I think the problem is something other than what the problem really is. That's why you work back to, if I still have the problem, then it means I don't really know what the problem is. The wrong mind goes, I know what the problem is, and I'm going to fix it on my own, even though it still hasn't worked. You know, you're still seeing your same relationship patterns, your same spiritual patterns, your same financial patterns. Notice that your patterns show up in different people. The same patterns will show up in different people, even though those people didn't get on the phone and talk to each other before they got in a relationship with you. So you have the same pattern in all your relationships. It's the same as saying you have the same problem. So I don't know about you, but I'm glad to hear that the reason why my problem hasn't been solved is because I don't recognize what the problem is, because that means there is a solution to my problem. That means there is a solution to my problem. That means there is a solution to this problem. If there's a solution, but I don't really recognize what it is, that doesn't mean there's not a solution. It just means I don't recognize what it is, which means that that problem could not only be solved, it could already be solved. So why am I saying this over and over again? Because the Course in Miracles says it's through repetition that you change your mind, not through analyzation. Analyzation doesn't change your mind. Repetition changes your mind. Telling yourself what you want to believe, telling yourself the truth over and over and over again, that's what changes your mind. Analyzing doesn't change your mind. Thinking that your understanding makes stuff work is not the way that it works. If I want to change my mind and therefore change my perception and my experience, I need to repeat over and 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 over what the truth is. Do you know I've been repeating over and over again all my life what the world has taught me and what people think? And you know what I'm saying? Think about how many things that you have said to yourself. I'm a body, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm Earl, you're outside of me, we're separate from each other. There's a lot of things I've been saying over and over. Sometimes I would tell myself I wasn't good enough, or something was wrong with me, or that I was insecure. I had to repeat a lot of stuff over and over and over and over and over again. But for some reason, I had the feeling that I could just say the truth 1 or 2 times and it was going to change my life. But I would repeat the stuff that makes me sad or upset over and over again. I would repeat what I thought people had done to me in my past over and over and over again. So I noticed that I have the capacity to repeat the crappy stuff that keeps me feeling bad over and 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 over. But if the Course says, I want you to say to yourself, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved, I'm lucky if I can remember that once for the rest of the day. So I want to repeat it over and over and over again. That's why I call myself the divine repetition teacher. It's because if the Course says repeat it, and so I'm going to repeat it. So that means even if you have the answer, you can't see the answer's relevance. Whew. Well, that describes everything I've been doing since I started talking, right? I'm telling you something that you may not see the relevance of. So even if I give you the answer, then you can't see that the answer is relevant if you've already come up with another solution. If you've already come up with your own answer and I give you the answer, then you're not going to see the relevance of my answer. Could that be why Spirit has a hard time getting things across to us? It's because we already think we know what the problem is, and so we're going to Spirit so that Spirit can act out our solution. So what God is supposed to do is give me what I want, the way I want it, in the way that I've defined that I needed to have it. So I go to God to act out my plan. I don't go to the higher power to act out its plan. I make up what I think I want, and then I make up my mind about that, and then I go to God. Then I go to higher power. After I've made up my mind about I've made up my mind, you're going to be the one that makes me happy. So I'm going to go to God so God can tell me I can get you. Right? God's supposed to tell me how to impress you, get next to you, and be in a rest. Because I've decided you are what I want, and I've decided that you're the best thing for me. And the truth is, in terms of compatibility, we could be the worst thing in the world for each other. So just because I want you doesn't mean you're necessarily the best thing for me. So I decided on a solution to my loneliness, And then I expected God to make my fantasy happen. Sort of like the Creator is a genie in a bottle, right? And what we think the Creator should do is give us everything we think we want. That's God's job. I come up with what I want, and then Spirit gives it to me. Okay, so therefore, if I'm given the real answer, I won't see its relevance. He says, well, that's the position in which you guys find yourself now. You have the answer, but you're still uncertain about what the problem is. You have the answer, but you're still uncertain about what the problem is. So let's explain that. What does that mean? He says, well, a long series of different problems seems to confront you. It looks like you got a lot of different problems that are confronting you. Now, some of you are going to say, I don't have any problems at all. And all I have to say to you is, great. Okay, but for those of you out there who think they still have problems and things they wish were different in order for them to be happy, that means this is especially for you, right? So now, that's the position in which I find myself in. I still think there are areas of my life. This is how I can tell when I have an area of my life that I think is a problem. I say something like, if this were different, I would be happy. If they were different, I'd be happy. If I was in another place, I'd be happy. If I was in another circumstance, I'd be happy. If I weighed less, I'd be happy. If I weighed more, I'd be happy. If I had more friends, I'd be happy. If I had, see, that's my problem, is I think that something needs to be different out here in order for me to feel good. That everything about how I feel has to do with how everybody else responds and reacts. So that's my problem. My problem is, I think you have to be different in order for me to be happy. And you can have a series of things. I was thinking about some issues that I was thinking about with a family member this morning and how I wanted to see that and how I wanted to apply this to that. I could think of several things I was thinking about that I could go with. Okay, it looks like I got a long series of different problems that seem to confront me. And have you noticed that this is the characteristic of us solving problems? The Course says when we solve problems, it looks like this. As one problem is settled, the next problem and the next problem comes up. It looks like as soon as you get the relationship problem handled, all of a sudden there's a financial problem. It looks like you get the financial problem happen, and they told you there's something going on with your body. You think you get the body problem handled, and then they lay you off your job. You see, have you seen that in your life? Just as soon as you think you get one thing handled, something else comes up, and there seems to be no end to problems. It seems to be when I was 10 years old, I had the problem of, could I get my marbles back in the day? Can I get my bicycle fixed? You name it. I can't think of any time in my life going back to as young as I want to go back, that there wasn't a problem that I thought I wanted solved in some way, or something that I thought was keeping me from being happy, that I thought I needed to change in order for me to be happy. And that's what the Course is saying. There seems to be no end to the problems. If you watch the news, that would be one of the greatest ways in the world that you could see what I'm talking about right now. All they do from the time it comes on to the time it goes off is to try to scare the hell out of you with every kind of negative, fearful, horrible thing that you can possibly come up with. And all these different problems are being presented, but no solutions are being presented really. So it looks like there's one problem after another problem, and then the Course in Miracles says, there is no time in which you feel completely free of problems. So what does it mean to be at peace? One of the things about being at peace is that you will feel like you're completely free of problems. You'll feel problem-free. When you experience a true inner peace, you will not feel like you are burdened with problems. So, there is no time when I feel, here's the key word, completely. There is no time that I feel completely free of problems. There isn't. Now, there could be a time that I feel free of some problems, but I've never experienced a time that I felt completely free of problems on every level, in every kind of way in my life. Now, I can pretend I have, because maybe I'm feeling really good in this moment, so that's the main thing I'm focusing on, so that it'll make me think, oh, well, I don't have anything else bothering me. No, the truth is, I want to get out of any problems that I think I have, and what the Course has taught me is the easiest way and the fastest way to get out of any problem is to get out of denial. to be willing to tell the truth about all of your feelings and not pretend that you feel something that you don't feel. So I'm going to admit to you all that sometimes it looks like there's a long series of problems that are confronting me. Do you sometimes think a long series of problems are confronting you? And it looks like when you solve one problem, then another problem and another problem comes up. So he says there's no time in which you feel completely free of problems and at peace. So what is your temptation? The Course says, well, your temptation is to regard problems as many. So what is the temptation that I'm going to have? I'm going to be tempted to say, I have many problems. I'm going to constantly during the day be tempted to say, I have a long series of problems, that I have many different problems. So if you are a person that is regarding your problems as many, the Course says that's you being tempted to keep your problem. If you want to keep your problems, if you want to keep your problem in whatever area you wish that you had more peace and joy and happiness in, wherever you think you have a problem, all you have to do to keep the problem of separation unsolved, to keep that problem not solved, you're going to be tempted to keep on saying you have different problems. You're going to be tempted to say you have many problems. So every time you say you have many problems, then you're keeping the problem unresolved. Whenever you say I have many different problems or any different problems, then the Course is saying, I don't know how to break it to you, but that's why your problem doesn't get solved in your perception. That's why you keep the problem, because you tell yourself you have many different problems. And anytime you tell yourself you have many different problems, you're going to keep the problem. You're going to keep the problem. Every time I tell myself I have a different relationship problem with my family, a different relationship problem with my partner, a different relationship problem with my coworkers, I'm just giving different examples. Anytime, according to the Course, that you say that you have many different problems, that's you being tempted to keep the problem unresolved. Are you in the habit of thinking in terms of a long series of different problems that you can have? Are we used to thinking that we can have different problems? Well, he said, the Course is saying, well, that's what's going to be your temptation. Your temptation is going to be to keep on looking at it the way you've been programmed to look at it, which is that you have a lot of different problems. That's why you hear me saying that over and over and over again. Why am I saying it over and over again? Because I know we're in the habit, as soon as this class is over, you can be in the habit of saying, I have a problem with my car, I have a problem with my boss. You go right back to there's a problem with the environment, there's a problem that's going on in the country. You know, and when we get out of here, we're going to have what the Course calls temptation. But Course's temptation is not the temptation to eat too much. It's the temptation to continue to look at yourself the way you already have, using the programming that you already have and that you've been using all your life. My temptation is to go back to looking at things the way Earl has learned how to look at things. That's my temptation, to continue to see myself as separate and not see myself as totally innocent or not see myself totally as connected to God. My temptation is to continue to use my own old patterns and conditioning in terms of the way I live my life. We come to classes or we read books because we say we want to change and we want to become a better person in some way else. The Course is saying, well, the way that you do that is to recognize, first of all, that whatever you think your problem is, and you still think you got the problem, that isn't really the problem. So the first thing you want to do, if you really want to be healed, is let go of the idea that you know what your problem is, and you've been trying to solve your problem, and you still got the problem. It means you just don't know what the problem is. You just don't know what the problem is. You just don't know what the problem is. It's not so much that it's just a solution you were trying to act out that doesn't work. Another way to look at it is you don't know what the problem is if the problem hasn't been solved. So the world seems to present you with a vast number of problems, each requiring a different answer. The Course is just saying it straight up. I know what you all are going through. I know your world seems to present you with a lot of problems, and it looks like each one of these problems need a different answer. And what does the Course call that? The Course calls that a perception. So you have the perception that your life is presenting you with a lot of problems requiring a lot of answers. You have the perception that you have a lot of problems that need a lot of answers in some areas of your life. That's a perception. You have a perception that you are being presented with a whole lot of problems, and each one of those problems has a different answer. And what this perception does, the Course says, is that it places you in a position in which your problem solving must be inadequate. And guess what's inevitable? Failure. Now, one of the reasons why, if you got the book, I'm very book intensive in my Course in Miracles classes because I'm a goal of a good teacher is to make themselves unnecessary. So the more that I can support people into doing their study on their own, that's what's most important to me, because I know anybody that studies this seriously gets the peace and begins to get the peace that it promises. That just listening to it isn't enough. The actual giving it attention and study is really important. If you want to get the miracles that the Course in Miracles promises, then reading the book is imperative and doing the workbook is imperative. That's why you see me working out of the workbook. If you notice, whatever sections I choose to work with on Sunday are always sections that are giving us very specific things to do. Like we just got through doing a series of classes on the Holy Spirit's curriculum and how you're supposed to see things as love and the call for love and help and healing. That's practical. See, I want what is the Course saying that's practical? But if you're not metaphysical, sometimes it's hard to see the power of what it's saying. What I mean by metaphysical is a metaphysical mind is a mind that believes that thoughts are things that manifest and create your reality. Basic metaphysics is my beliefs create my reality. My thoughts determine my perceptions. That everything is coming from thought. That's the difference from a so-called New Age, New Thought person and a regular person. Is a regular person believes basically that they're a victim of forces outside themselves that they can't control, that keeps happening to them. And a person that is more metaphysical in their spiritual perception, or more seeing it correctly, are knowing that they know that their experience is a direct reflection of their beliefs and their thoughts and their ideas. That's the only difference between so-called New Age, New Thought people and regular people. Regular people believe they're separate from everybody and that they're basically victims and can be victims. A conscious being knows that they're the creator of their experience and that everything that happens to them is coming to them at their request at some level. They're the ones that's creating their reality. That's it. You got it? And so there are only two types of people you're going to get involved with. People with a victim consciousness, which means they could ultimately blame you for whatever it is they think they're going through because they don't take personal responsibility for nothing or very little. And then people who take responsibility, and if they're with you, no matter what's happening between you, they see themselves as also responsible for making that happen, just like you're responsible for making it happen. That's the difference. So you give it a victim person, the victim person is going to blame you for everything that's going on, and they're going to tell you how you need to change in order for them to be happy. A conscious being is going to go, you don't have to change at all. Be who you really are. I'm going to change the way I think and the way I look at things, and I'm going to take responsibility for my happiness. And guess what? Sometimes it might mean I might have to choose out of this relationship if we can't talk and communicate and come up with a common purpose and goal and be willing to get past our blocks with each other because we care about each other. Well, I'm going to choose out of this because this is going to fail. So we only have one. We don't recognize what our problem is, baby. That's why you and I are upset with each other right now. It's because we don't recognize what our problem is. If I'm unhappy right now, it means I don't recognize what my happiness is. It probably means I've come up with something I thought was going to be fun and really enjoy, and it didn't turn out the way I wanted to. But that means I don't really know what my happiness is. Now, any happiness that you can't have now, do you know that any happiness that you can't have now is not real happiness? Yes. Say that again. Any happiness that you cannot have right now is not real happiness. Real happiness is always available to us, and real happiness is always available to us anytime and any place we are, and with anybody we're with. Now, if I'm with you and I'm bored as hell, it's because on some level, I'm looking for you to entertain me. And you're not doing a very good job of it. So I'm going to drop you and I'm going to go find somebody else because somebody else needs to make me happy because you don't do such a good job. Mm-hmm. See, I don't recognize what the problem is. See, the problem isn't that I haven't found the right person that'll make me happy. The problem is I'm separate from the truth right now. I'm separate from telling myself what the real truth is right now. My problem is separation. So I'm just saying this in many different ways so that we can see that the Course in Miracles is very, very, very practical. Now, nobody can solve all the problems the world seems to hold. What? You cannot solve all the problems that the world has. You cannot solve all the problems. Nobody can solve all the problems of the world. No one can solve all the problems of the world. No one can solve all the problems of the world. No one can solve all the problems of the world. No one can solve all the problems the world seems to hold. Nobody can solve all the problems the world seems to hold. Do you know why no one can solve all the problems that the world seems to hold? Because there are problems on so many levels. The problems seem to come in so many different forms, and the problems seem to have so much different content that all the problems in the world, the Course says, confronts you with an impossible situation. Why shouldn't you be depressed if it looks like you're constantly being presented with things that you cannot solve? That's why the world to many people is depressing, because they look at it as being full of a lot of problems that can't be solved. So if I think of the world as being full of a lot of problems that can't be solved, then I'm going to feel depressed. If you're in a relationship and you believe that the problems in that relationship cannot be solved, that you're going to keep on having the same challenges with each other over and over and over again, the Course says you're going to feel dismay and depression. So how do you get rid of depression? Well, from listening to this, the way that you would get rid of depression is by recognizing that you can't solve all the problems that the world appears to hold, and to remind yourself that all these problems are just one problem. Reduce all your problems to one problem. That alone should make a person feel better. If I thought I had 10 problems and you tell me I only have one problem, then that should make me feel a little bit better than if I was told I had 100 problems. So telling yourself you only have one problem and that problem has been solved, but just telling yourself you have one problem will make you feel better. You think you got a health problem and a financial problem and a relationship problem and a job problem and a child problem and a weather problem and a car problem, and then I say to you, oh no, you don't have 7 or 8 different problems. You just have one. I think I'd feel better. I think I'd instantly feel better. So the Course in Miracles says, and now it's going to describe to us how problems work. What happens without problems? It says, some problems spring up unexpectedly. Just as you think you got the previous problem resolved, another problem springs up. Okay, Earl Purdy is going to admit that I do have problems that seem to spring up unexpectedly, just as I think I've resolved some problems that I thought I had. It looks like another problem pops up. Then he says, other problems remain, this is my favorite, other problems remain unsolved under a cloud of denial. So what does that mean? The truth is I have all these issues and these patterns and things that I need to change about myself, but I'm in denial about it. You know, some people, the only way they can be happy is to be in denial, right? So let me give you an example. I can feel really good if I think I can deny that there's a war going on. If I can deny that and pretend that that's not happening, that'll make me feel better. If I deny that there appears to be people that are starving, it makes me have a much better day. If I'm in denial, the truth is, I think of myself as being this really giving, unselfish person, but the truth is that there's some selfishness in me that I really need to take a look at. But I'm in denial about that. So I feel good about myself because of what I'm in denial about. That's why you don't get a person out of denial and just leave them there. You want to give them something better to focus on. You know, if I'm in denial about my insecurity and you make me aware of the insecurity and you leave me with the insecurity, then you just made things worse. I still got the insecurity. Now I'm out of denial about it, so I feel like crap. And you're not doing anything to help me get out of it. So the Course gets us out of denial, but it also uses the denial to benefit us and to take us to what we really want and what would really make us happy. So the Course doesn't get you out of denial and leave you there. It gets you out of denial and then brings you the joy and the peace and the happiness that you're looking for. That's what the Course does. But one phase of it is having to get out of denial. and tell the truth. And so the Course, it says some of your problems you're in denial about. So what do they do? He says, well, if you have problems that you're in denial about, they rise to haunt you. Have you ever been haunted by a problem, like a ghost, like you being haunted? Well, the Course in Miracles says, when you're in denial, then what you're in denial about comes up from time to time, and then you hide it again, and then you still don't resolve it. I think my partner doesn't like me for some reason, but I'm in denial about that, and I'm pretending that I don't feel that way. Then it comes up when I feel insecure sometimes, and I think my partner doesn't like me, and then so I'm going to hide that idea that my partner doesn't like me. So I hid the problem, but I still haven't resolved the problem. So that's what people do with problems in denial. The problem comes up, the situation comes up, the pattern comes up, and then they freak out, and then as quick as they can, they try to hide it again, but they don't really solve it or don't really deal with it. And those are the problems that the Course in Miracles says we basically have. We have what kind of problems? We have problems that spring up unexpectedly, and we have problems that we're in denial about. Because I don't know about you, but in most cases when a problem happens to me, it seems to pop up. Like I don't wake up and go out into my day knowing what I think the problems are going to be that I deal with that day. They do seem to spring up unexpectedly. And it does look like when I get one thing solved, then another thing comes up. And it does look like I'm in denial about some things, and I'll be honest about being in denial about some things. And sometimes those things come up, and then I try to hide it again. Or let's say I have a lot of jealousy. That's a great example. I have a lot of jealousy, but I'm in denial about how jealous I am. And so every now and then my jealousy pops up unexpectedly, but instead of trying to get rid of the jealousy, I try to pretend I'm not feeling jealous, and I do the other stupid thing, which is to try to get the other person to do the thing that doesn't make me jealous. Which is the worst way in the world to try to get rid of a pattern on your part, is to ask everybody else to honor and conform to your pattern and change themselves so that you won't feel jealous. I remember pretending, I thought I didn't have any jealousy for a long time. I remember that being a total denial about that. Till I saw my girlfriend at that time, seemed like she was a little bit too close to somebody she was dancing with and enjoying it just a little too much. And then I felt like somebody had taken a knife and stuck it into my heart. It was the weirdest thing. I understand why they call it a stab of jealousy, because that's really what it felt like. I went, whoa! And that's, I said I'd been in denial. So now I could have went up to her and said, hey, darling, I'm really jealous, so don't you dance with him anymore. See, that's me thinking that that's the problem, but that's not the problem at all. That's an example of I would still have my jealousy problem because I don't recognize what my jealousy problem is. My jealousy problem is me feeling separate from love, me feeling separate from God, me feeling separate from my true, authentic self. The problem is in me. The problem is I need to change my mind so that I don't feel jealousy. But the wrong solution is going to be for me to try to get my partner or that person to change their behavior so I won't feel jealous. And then I say, if you really love me, you wouldn't dance with anybody else. Would that work? Not that the person really wanted to dance with somebody else. So that problem is not going to be solved because it's not the real problem. The real problem is that I feel separate from my trust for you and the trust for what we have. The real problem is separation. The real problem is if I thought you and me really had a real relationship and I thought you and me really, really loved each other, I wouldn't be jealous and I wouldn't feel jealous. If I felt centered in myself and strong and rooted in my true self, I would never get jealous. So the problem is my feeling separated from my own authenticity, my own true identity, and God. That's why I suggest when I do these classes, I suggest that people watch the replays and watch it and listen to it more than one time, because I know it's very seldom that people hear the truth and they get it the first time they hear it, especially when they're ruled by their old patterns and habits, which is their ego. So the Course is saying to me, guess what? All this complexity is but a desperate attempt not to recognize the problem. So the more complex that you feel like your problem is, the Course is saying that's your desperate attempt not to recognize the problem. So any problem that you think you have that's a complex problem is a problem that you are trying to not recognize what the problem really is. So the more complex the problem is, that's you trying not to recognize what the problem is. So whatever area of your life that you think you have the most complex problem, that's where you attempt to not to recognize the problem and not to let it be solved. So, okay, Earl, so what area of your life right now are you trying to keep the problem from being solved? It's whatever area of my life right now that the problem seems most complex. So whatever, if you have a complex medical problem, if you have a complex philosophical problem, if you got a complex relationship problem, wherever you think you're dealing with the most complex problem, that is where you are attempting not to let the problem be resolved. So if you could recognize that your only problem is separation, if you could recognize that your only problem is thinking that you're separate from God, that your only problem is thinking that you're separate from the truth. Your only problem is thinking that you're separate from the universe. Your only problem is thinking that you're separate from spirit. The Course says if you could recognize that that's your only problem, no matter what form your problem is taken, no matter what your problem looks like, that problem is a problem in separation. He says at that point you could accept the answer because you could see that the answer is relevant. If you could accept that you only have one problem, then you would have your problem solved, and then you would actually see that the answer was relevant. Because when you use the answer, which is to say, I only have one problem and my problem is separation, when you watch what would happen if you really sincerely, consistently did that, then you would say, man, that answer was really relevant to say that I only have one problem because I got the answer in the solution to the problem. So because I got the solution, now I see how telling myself I only have one problem and repeat that. Now I see why it's relevant because I'll get the result that I'm looking for. Wow. So perceiving the underlying constancy in all the problems that seem to confront you, seeing that there's just one problem, separation, in all the problems that seem to confront you, you would understand that you have the means to solve all your problems. You have the means to solve all your problems. You have the means to solve all your problems right now. You've been given the means to solve all your problems. You have the way to solve any problem you think you have right now. You have the means to solve all of your problems right now. You have the means to solve all of your problems right now. There's a way to solve all your problems, what you perceive as your problems or your problem right now. And if you realize all your problems are just the same problem, the problem of separation, that's the only problem you have, is you think you're separate, that you think you're separate, that you think you're separate. You tell yourself you only have one problem. Tell yourself you only have one problem. If you want your problem solved, if you'd like to see some answers and some healing come to you, tell yourself you only have one problem, even though it looks like you have a long series of problems, or it might look like you have these different situations and circumstances that you're trying to deal with right now. Even though you might feel like you have these pressures in different areas of your life right now, tell yourself there's just one problem. 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 If you tell yourself you have only one problem, then you have the means to solve all of your problems, and you would use it if you believe that. You would use it if you believe that, and you would get the solution to the problem, and you recognize the problem, and you have the answer and the solution. And when you have the answer and solution because you do what you were told, when you have the answer and solution because you're finally doing what you're reading, when you have the answer and solution because you're doing what you're told, then you will see that the answer is relevant because now you recognize the problem. I'm going to stop right here, and then I'm going to do a quick little recap right at the end. See, my goal is that if you were to walk out of here and one time this week you remember to say, oh, I still think I got this problem, which means I don't really know what the problem is, which means I need to tell myself that I just have one problem, and then say, let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. If I actually would do what I'm being told, then I would get the answer and I would get the solution, and the change that would happen in my life and in my mind would be so great that I would see the relevance of this answer. And so the next time I'm tempted to tell myself I got a lot of different problems, I'm not going to give in to that temptation, because I've already been told the only temptation I'm going to have is the temptation to keep on looking at it and dealing with it the way that I always have. See that? Everybody hear me on that? Right. So thank you for sharing. I'm gonna pass the love offering around, and so I need your help. I want to join with other people who want to remember together, and I feel like you do. Thank you. Those of you online who would like to make a financial expression of appreciation, I'm a full-time teacher of the Course in Miracles. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. You can use my website, Earl Purdy, at earlpurdy.com. You can use Venmo, the Cash App, PayPal, Zelle, or Square. All you need is my email address, and my email address is earlpurdy at earlpurdy.com. Earl Purdy at earlpurdy.com. Earl Purdy at earlpurdy.com. If you're in the Denver area, come tune in. Come on down and join with us on a personal one-to-one live level at 1555 Race Street in Denver, Colorado. 1555 Race Street, 80206, 1 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. I'm also on Facebook, at Facebook Live on the Earl Purdy page. And all of my classes are also uploaded from YouTube, and I'll have to start next week doing simulcasting on YouTube and on Facebook. But I'm going to also be broadcasting on Facebook at the exact same time that I'm broadcasting on YouTube. So you won't have to be a member of Facebook in order to watch a live presentation, because I'm going to be doing both of them at the same time to reach. I'm getting a great response from people, and I want to be able to reach more people. Because I don't know if you know it or not, but the world is calling for love. The world is calling for love. The world is calling for love. The world is calling for insanity. The world is calling for God. There's a big, huge call for God. There's a yell. There's a scream. There's a shout for God that's going on in our world right now. And nobody in the world can solve all the problems of the world, because we don't recognize what the problem really is. So what does the Course says? Well, the Course says you have one responsibility. And what is that one responsibility? It says to accept what this is saying for yourself. What? You cannot heal the world outwardly. But the Course says if you would do your part by learning the truth for yourself and applying it to yourself, you're going to have so many miracles happen in your life that miracles are going to become ordinary to you. Love is going to become ordinary. People being kind and friendly and things working out and you having more peace and joy is going to become just your ordinary life. You have a life that's just ordinarily the way it is that you have a lot of fulfillment and you have a lot of peace and you have a lot of joy and you have a lot of happiness, and you won't see that as a special event like we have a tendency now. I remember that when I went to Paris 10 years ago. See, that was a special event of happiness for me. And the truth is, every day should be a miracle. Every day should be joyful. Every day should be a day that you're experiencing peace and happiness. And if that's not happening, it's because you don't know what the problem is. You think you know what the problem is, and you don't. And the Course says, I'll tell you what the problem is. I bet you anything, if you're honest, you're thinking you have a whole lot of issues and things you need to be dealing with right now. Mm-hmm. You walk in the world thinking that you got all these different things you got to handle right now. That is what's keeping your problems from being solved. That's what's keeping your problems from being solved, is you continue to think that you have a lot of different issues that are different that you got to deal with every day. Is what the Course in Miracles is telling us. So check it out. YouTube. I got all my classes on YouTube, all my classes on Facebook. And I also practice and use astrology and numerology for those who would like a reading with me. in that regard. The Course in Miracles teaches that everything you've learned, everything in the world can be used as a means to teach and to teach love. So whatever skills you have, whatever you've learned, Holy Spirit, higher self can use those skills to bring more light and love and truth on the planet. Because sometimes I have people go, well, how does astrology relate to the Course in Miracles? Well, it's just like anything else. It's something that can be used as a way for you to communicate with the universe, with spirit, and with your higher self. Everybody's not going to be reached the same way. It's ridiculous to think, it would be ridiculous for me to think that everybody had to get into the Course in Miracles. I'm here for the people who are sent and who want to get into the Course in Miracles, and they relate to it in the way that I do it works for them. Those are the ones that the Course in Miracles says would be sent to me. And the Course says that's the way it is with everybody in your life, that you could have spirits sent to you, people who need you just the way you are. Instead of meeting people who constantly want you to be different so that they can be okay and be happy, you could be sent to people that when you express yourself authentically, that is the best thing that they could possibly experience, and it teaches them all the things that they need to know. So you can be yourself, and yet you're benefiting the people in your life. So what would be a surefire sign that you were with the wrong person? When you feel peace and harmony within yourself, and you feel like you're true to yourself, and they're trying to change you. That's not the right person. Now, it'd be a different thing if you said, I got a lot of issues and I want you to support me getting past those issues and let's try to get through those issues together. It's different from me saying, I feel pretty good about myself and my direction in life, and I'm learning how to use my own spiritual guidance, and I feel pretty peaceful with the way I am, yet you're continually telling me how I need to be different in order for you to be happy and what I need to change in order to please you. Nobody that really loved me would be trying to change me when I'm happy, and I'm not attacking. And I'm being loving, and I'm being peaceful. And you still got a problem with me? You don't recognize what the problem is. See, that's an example of that. You don't recognize what the problem is. Your problem is separation. Your problem is you're not really seeing me as truly connected to you and the same as you. If the truth is you're not seeing me as the spiritual being that I am, the truth is you feel separate from love. Because if you didn't feel separate from love, then you would just be appreciating me, not trying to change me. You would be appreciating me, not trying to change me. You would be appreciating me, not trying to change me. If you really love me and I'm being peaceful and loving, you wouldn't be trying to change that. If I was living my life and doing the things that really meant the most to me and my heart and who I authentically am, then if you really weren't separate from love, you'd know that your job was to rejoice with me and support me and to acknowledge me and appreciate me, and that would be the same thing that I'm supposed to be doing with you. So I know that you haven't recognized the problem, and I haven't recognized the problem if I think you and me have a lot of different problems. If I think there's a lot of different problems between us, it means we haven't recognized the real problem. So what is the Course telling me to do? The Course is saying what I want you to do then is, first of all, I want you to say, let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. And you want to say, I only have one problem, and that problem has one solution. Now, after you tell yourself the truth, then do whatever it is you felt intuitively guided to do by spirit. So first you check in with the truth, and then whatever you think you need to do on a physical level that's not attack, that is not attack, then what you feel led to do, you need to do it. But I guarantee you, if you start saying, I only have one problem, and it's already been solved, because don't forget now, what you think, what you focus on, what you think, that's what your life is going to be in your perception. That is going to be your physical experience. So I'd much rather think I had one problem than I think I had a whole lot of different problems that I had not been able to solve. That belief would produce a situation where I got a whole lot of problems that I don't know how to solve. That's where it comes from. I got a whole lot of problems. Okay, now you do. Or if I just got one problem and that problem's been solved. I just got one problem and it's already been solved. I had one problem and it's already been solved. And so what would that do? That would create my perception of the problem already being solved. So I need to remember that, because most people are not going, in my present level of consciousness, are not going to say that to me. They're not going to say to me, Earl, I know you think you got a lot of different problems, but you really have one problem, and that problem has already been solved. Most people are not going to say the truth to me. They're going to help me forget the truth. Just like I used to help them forget the truth. How do you help people forget the truth? Just talk about mundane, worldly things all the time that have to do with the body and separation without trying to talk about anything at a creative level or a spiritual level or anything that's going to remind you that you're innocent and that you're loved. Then you're having the temptation. At that point, the Course says, you're having the temptation to see yourself in the limited way that the world has taught you to see yourself. And that's the only temptation there is the temptation to limit yourself. That's the only temptation there is the temptation to limit ourselves. So how do we do that? We remind ourselves that there is only one problem and one solution. There's only one problem. So if you can do that much, even if you do it insincerely, even if you do it half-heartedly, doesn't matter, because you're doing what you're being asked to do. You are doing what the truth is telling you to do. And the part of you that doesn't want to do it, the part of you that's tempted not to do it, the part of you that's tempted not to do it, the part of you that's tempted not to do it would be the part of you that feels anxiety and feels tired just hearing about it. But that's not you. Your ego is 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 not you. Your belief that you're separate, that's not you. The belief that you're at any level guilty or afraid or unloved, that's not you. Your ego is not you. Your ego is not you. That false voice that doesn't make you feel alive and vibrant, that voice is not the voice that is your real voice. So I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to you. I'm not teaching you, I'm teaching you. Wow. You don't want to hear it. You really want to hear it. But you really don't want to hear it. But you really want to hear the truth. And so when I'm teaching, I'm always aware that I'm talking to the part of the person that has no interest in what I'm saying, and then the part of the person that has interest so much that they came here. But I don't fool myself about which is which. And that's what you got to learn how to do. You're going to learn how to ignore people's egos. You're going to learn how to ignore the craziness. You're going to learn how to ignore everybody that doesn't practice love. You're not going to attack them. You're going to let them say and act the way they want to act, but you are not going to want to engage because you know they have one problem and they haven't recognized that problem. And that problem is they haven't recognized that they are one. They haven't recognized who they really are. They still think they're separate and they still think they're different. So your problems have been solved. 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 Your one problem has been solved. All your problems have been solved. Your one problem has been solved. This problem that you think you have has been solved. This problem has been solved. The thing that you're going to be tempted to focus in on when you walk out of the door in terms of something you wish were different, that situation has been solved. There has been one problem and that problem has been solved. Do you have to believe it? No. Do you have to accept it at first? No. Do you have to welcome it at first? No. Are you going to resist some of this sometimes? Yes. Will you find this hard to believe that your problems have already been solved? Probably so. Does it startle you to know that all your problems have been solved, but you just don't know it because you don't know what the problem is? Yes. How do I get to the point that I can make this work in my life? Stop analyzing it. Stop judging it. Stop analyzing it. Stop judging it. Okay, if I'm not going to analyze it, I'm not going to judge, what am I going to do? I'm going to use it. If I use these ideas, then these ideas will have meaning to me, and these ideas will show me that these ideas are true. The idea will show you that it's true. What idea? My problems have been solved. Let me recognize I have only one problem, and it's been solved. That idea will show you that it's true. But you have to share ideas in order for ideas to become strong and powerful. A weak idea is an unshared idea. Like if you turn on the news or read the newspaper, a lot of times listen to people in the world, they're not saying the only answer is love, teach only love, demonstrate only love, be loving. We need to love each other. We need to love each other. We need to love each other. Let's be loving. Let's be loving. Let's love each other. Let's care for each other. See, that's an idea, but that idea isn't being shared. And so that idea isn't as strong as it could be in our perception. But I don't know about you, but I do hear the idea of division and the idea of separation and the idea of oppression and the idea of fear and the idea of separate. We're hearing these fearful ideas. They're ideas too. So they become strong and strong and stronger. And these ideas appear to manifest. And before you know it, you'll be thinking that the world is a fearful place because those are the only ideas you focus your attention on. And you won't realize there's another world that's based on those loving ideas that's realer than the one that's making us afraid right now. But why don't we know that? Because we think we have many other problems other than the one problem, which is we don't know our connection to our source the way we should. That connection to God and love the way that we should. That's the problem. I don't know I'm connected to my Creator. That's the problem. I don't always know that I'm connected with love. That's the problem. So the idea of love is the idea that needs to be shared. And that's why you hear me saying it. Because that's the idea that we need to be saying to each other. That's what we should be coming here to do. But it starts with telling yourself, I only have one problem. And that problem has been solved. That's what it starts with. That's what it starts with. So subscribe, watch my classes on YouTube. I love you so much. I appreciate you so much. And like I said, I'm going to be simulcasting on YouTube and also on Facebook at the same time. Bye.